to join us today for session 2 of the PKE Faculty Speaker Series. Of course, none of this would be possible without our Graziadio Alumni Engagement Team and the esteemed PKE Faculty Committee. Dr. David Smith is the chair, Dr. Miriam Lacey, Dr. Demos, Dr. Kurt Matamati, and Dr. John Scully, and of course, our own Jason Stuber. Thank you so much for making today and this series possible. As business leaders, we are constantly dealing with the ambiguity, unforeseen challenges, and of course, of all things, a global pandemic. However, in the world of uncertainty, it is of great comfort that we can rely on such a great alumni network and, of course, the amazing PKE faculty to provide information and insight. So please mark on your calendar. We have some remaining sessions that we would love for you to join and get the insight that this, this alumni network and faculty can provide. In March, we have our 3rd session, so please sign up for that, from Denise Robinson of 131, Unlocking and Igniting Brand Purpose. I cannot think of a more fitting session to have because of going into 2021, and the brand is going to be super important as we come out of the pandemic and things start coming back together. In June, sign up for session 4 with Dr. Scully, startup and equity allocation concerns. In August, session 5, Dr. Kurt Matamati is going to do business strategy Q&A forum. So as everybody knows, as executives, you start out in January with this beautiful strategy. By August, things are starting to change. Maybe they've changed a lot by then, considering last year and what happened there. So being able to tap in to Dr. Matamati and talk about the strategy and how to change the strategy to make 2021 your most successful year is sure to be a great session. So please sign up for those. As a special note, please take some time to join PEP Connect. If you're not familiar with it, there's a link that'll be on the screen. This is an amazing way for all of us to stay connected with our alma mater, and our contribution to the current students is essential in exemplifying Pepperdine as being the university of choice, as well as providing career and internship opportunities for students and others along the way to keep the PKE bond strong. Another way for us to help PKE stay strong is by recommending others to study at, of course, Graziadio Business School. And our contact for PKE is Pearl, and her information is also displayed on the screen. We also have where we extend a $2,500 referral scholarship to prospective students. So make sure you get your referrals in and allow these prospective students to get their scholarship. As a special thanks to those of you who serve by investing in your alma mater, our executive associates, our donors, is the special way to invest in our alma mater. You can email for more information on that, but the Give to PEP Day Challenge, which is March 9th through 10th, one of our very own PKE alums, Doug Scott, and his wife, Cindy, have stepped forward with a generous gift of $5,000 for PKE programs as part of the the Give to PEP. Pepperdine's upcoming Giving Day that will take place virtually on March 9th and 10th. On this day, the Pepperdine community will together to give back to the programs that are closest to their hearts. Doug and Cindy's gift will support the PKE program legacy of providing unique transformational executive MBA journey, opportunities for networking with a diverse cohort, and preparing industry leaders to take their organization to the next level. They challenge all those who value their PKE experience to join them in giving back to the worthy cause. Also, networking opportunities in an effort to facilitate Additional networking with the PKE alumni, students, and faculty, please use the form which has been dropped into chat to opt in to share the information you provide. By completing this form, you are allowing your information to be shared. Please complete, and the PDF of all responses will be shared with those who participate post-event. Nicole Green will be adding that form to the chat box now. While you are filling out the opt-in form, also check that your mute button is activated so our speaker is not interrupted. And as always, this session will be recorded. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. David Smith, Professor of Economics, Associate Provost of Online Programs, and Chair of the PKE Faculty Committee, who will introduce today's esteemed speaker.
Thank you very much, Alan, and it's a real privilege to be here, particularly to introduce my good colleague, Dr. Charlie Kearns. Charlie is a professor of applied behavioral science at Pepperdine Graziadio Business School. He has 4 decades of business, managerial leadership, teaching, and consulting experience. He is a practitioner-focused scholar, trusted advisor to C-level executives, and teacher. His research and work focuses on helping leaders and their organizations boost performance utilizing evidence-based behavioral science frameworks and tools. His experience, publications, and evidence-based approach to the study and practice of leadership underpins his core performance leadership system. This integrated holistic framework develops leaders to optimize performance and well-being. He is a licensed psychologist and holds specialty board certification in both industrial organization psychology and organizational business consulting psychology, American Board of Professional Psychology, ABPB. With that, we're really looking forward to hear what you have to say, Dr. Kearns, and I ask you to go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Dave. I appreciate it. I want to give a shout out to Jason Stubbers, who's coordinating today the slides, and he's been helpful in conversations with me. So thank you very much. And Jason's a part of the alumni engagement group. And I'd like to also share my appreciation for the alumni network and all the footwork that you've done. And I'd like to also give a warm welcome to all of the folks that are on the alumni that are joining us today and the prospective students. This is a real pleasure for me. I'm a lifelong learner, as you all, by virtue of the fact that you're here today. And so it's a real pleasure and a treat for me to get this opportunity to be with you. I'd like to, what we're going to do is, let me just preview really quickly, and then we're going to look at, I have 4 slides, and the 5th slide is actually Q&A, which Jason will coordinate at the end, toward the end of the presentation. But I have 4 slides. On each slide, there's some content. And before we get to that, I'd like to say a couple of things. You hear about leadership, executive presence, and executive presence is a word that typically is used, in the literature and a popular press. I prefer us to talk about leadership presence, and we'll get into this in a moment. But I'll use the word leadership presence, but if you prefer executive presence, then we can use that. And I'd like to, what you're going to have today, what I'm going to share with you is the work that I've been doing, both applied research, but also very much practice oriented with a number of organizations, the CEOs in these organizations, and most recently with students. This is a relatively new concept. And in terms of what I'm going to share with you, there's an action role in particular we're going to focus on, but we're going to provide a little context for that. But you're also going to get an article that Jason will send to you about leadership presence that you'll receive, that will have a whole lot in there. And the focus will be on that particular article, looking at some behavioral practices, because one can define leadership presence if you want, in a way that it's a series of practices that you use to either cast a cloud on yourself if you don't use them well, or cast the sunlight. And so you're going to get that. So you'll have that to think about and reflect upon. And we're going to hit some high level points today. So with that in mind, why don't we get busy, and we'll look at our first slide, and I'll comment on it, and then we'll drill down on each one of those. So let's get going here. All right, so this first slide happens to leadership presence. So there it is. And we've got 6 items below it. And let's go from top to bottom and look at each one of these. Before we talk about, drill down a little bit on presence, leadership presence, let's talk about leadership at a higher level. And so we hear a leader and the leader. And I have versus in there. It's really not a versus thing, but it's interesting. It's like a dynamic. And some people are the leader by the title. CEO, CFO, go down the food chain. People have titles in organizations. But everyone is a leader in some realm of their life. And so when we think about this idea of a leader, I want you to be considering that not only if you're the leader, but also as the leader, there are times when you need to be led, right? And so it's a shifting, it's a very dynamic flow type of thing. And when we think about leadership, another point is let's, for our purposes today, think about it. If you boil all the literature and all the work and your experience, we boil it down to a couple of things. One, a leader, whether you're the leader or leader, it's a process where we're trying to get an individual or a group or an organization from point A to point B, and they wouldn't have gotten to point B unless you had some influence on getting there. It may have been incremental, it may have been the answer, but nevertheless, leadership is about influencing a person, a group, or an organization, or a situation such that they change and make some movement. And so with that in mind, let's move on to self-presentation, which is another way to think about leadership presence. And there's a whole lot of work and a book written on self-presentation. And in the past, we've seen these books about dress for success and these kinds of things. We'll talk about the behavioral aspect of it, things that you can say and do. That's what we're going to focus on today. And in that article you're going to get, you'll see the same sort of thing. So I'm hoping today that you'll see as we go forward here, you'll take some practical pearls that you can use and take back at least some thoughts based upon this. So self-presentation, how do you show up? So ask yourself, how do you show up? And there's a couple of things that go on there. There's a situation and what you bring to the topic on the table. That could be a meeting, whether it's Zoom or face-to-face. Meetings are a wonderful practice field for you to show up. But if you go the next step, an organization is nothing but a bunch of behavior, of which leader behavior is very important. So the question becomes, what behavior do you bring to the situation? And so when you're showing up, what is it that you are presenting? And a couple of things. The next item, number 3 on the list, is your uniqueness. You bring your uniqueness. All of us, as we are on this call today, we have a unique profile of personal resources. The question is, are those languishing? Or are we using them? Are we using them in a way that shines light on your presence, or it's a big cloud? And so focus on, and I ask everyone to think about, what's one thing, if you were making a list of your strengths, what would be one of the things at the top that you would say, this is me, this is who I am, and this is how I'd like to be seen? And then the question becomes, how is that being revealed? Is that uniqueness being revealed? There is no complete leader, but there is a complete person, and we bring our whole self to leadership. So we bring our uniqueness as we present ourselves, and then we bring our wisdom. And so when we think about wisdom, all of us have, and we'll define it as personalized knowledge that comes to us through experience and through learning. So through this experience and learning, we become wise. So we go back to the topic at the top there. I'm not a leader. Yes, you are a leader, and you're unique, and you are wise. You have wisdom, so don't forget it. Now the question becomes at the bottom, and the title for the talk is asset and or liability. And you'll notice it's an asset, it's a cloud. It's a sun. And you see those sunbursts, and each one of those rays could be a facet of your uniqueness. We're going to look at one action role that can be a facet of that asset, as an asset. Or you could roll into a meeting, to a situation, and a big cloud. Darkness comes, oh, they're coming. They're here. And, and everyone accordingly responds. Or is it light? And so the question is, how do we project this? And before we go to the next slide, I'd just like to say, we're going to focus on projecting this presence through an action role, and then we're going to look at some practices, and then we'll tie it all together. So let's go to the next slide, Jason. All right, so projecting a positive. Now, let me digress for one moment. As I said, there is a dark side to presence, but we're going to focus for the rest of our time about the bright side. We do know that globally, there's an epidemic of bad leadership. And so we're going to focus now on bringing positive light to yourself. So let me look at this. Before we look at this action role, this is something that I've developed over the last few years. And I want to share it with you. And it's an invitation for you to think about yourself in relationship to using this action role to present your uniqueness and to offer your wisdom in a situation. And so we will look at this, and to move away from the color-coded words, let me just say in a sentence or two what it is, and then we'll unpack it. But what this is saying is, the action role is saying you have a value-added contribution to make in situations. So you're in a meeting, the topic comes up, and do you add value to that conversation? And do you, by presenting your knowledge, your personalized knowledge, your experience, you've got something to say about it. We could survey the room right now, survey the Zoom meeting and say, what is it that you know on the topic of leadership that would be beneficial? And you know what? We'd get a lot of rich answers. That's the beauty of the PKE program, for example. We love to have our sessions where we come together and we share and we learn from each other. And so we all have, going back to that first slide, we all have something wise to say, but it's topic specific in the situation. Now, the question is, do you say it in a way that people would want to listen? And do you say it in a way that connects to something they care about? And in the end, can you export what you've said and the way that you've said it and the connection you made? Can you and that person or group or organization, organizational learning, can you do it in a way that teaches them something that you can index and say, it's a lesson learned? And starting with an individual, you can move forward and actually have a charter, if you will, 3 or 4 things, or maybe more, of lessons that you've learned, that value-added contributions that your organization, team, and individuals have made. Now, I've done this now in a number of organizations recently that are manufacturing, and they're looking at things like increasing revenue from new products, looking from supply chain, decreasing downtime, increasing on-time delivery, decreasing late deliveries. But it starts with an individual having ideas in meetings and in groups, and then they export it out, and eventually it impacts the organization. So let's look at each one of these. With that in mind, there's an action role here that I'd like for you to consider when you're focusing on presenting yourself, when you're presenting yourself in situations. So here's the situation. And so when we say wise, that's really talking about making your personalized knowledge visible and put it on the table. Now, you can do that in many ways. What I've found in looking at and developing this action role, is that the warm, assertive way is the way, and they go together, warm and assertive. Now, leaders you can be cold and harsh, or you can be warm and empathetic. Now, it's very interesting that behind this whole action role is a whole lot of thought and research. One is neuroscience. The neuroscientists are telling us, believe it or not, when I first read it, I went, whoa. One study said that 90% of us, 90% of empathy is inborn in 90% of us. But on the other hand, very few of us show it, and we're not empathy when we're thinking about it, it's just understanding and the other person's perspective. And couple that with assertiveness, it means, okay, here's my point, here's the wisdom, here's the pearl. I'm saying it in a way, this is my intent, and I'm saying it, but I'm saying it in a way that will encourage you to listen. And by the way, this is a topic we're all concerned about. How are we going to get new revenues from these products, new revenues from the new products? Because we're not going to grow that wise. We need more internal growth. And so along the way, you have opportunities in those sessions to make a contribution, but do you do it in a way that people are going to listen and do they care about? And then there'll be those teachable moments. We just don't leave it there. You go, okay, now what do we learn from this? Well, I've learned this, and you can start indexing that and talking about it. You go, well, I can remember, well, Ruth said that, and now that's what she said, back there. That's what he said, and that's what happens. You build a learning culture, but it starts with this action role. Now, a little bit of background on this. This is really the healing arts, medicine, and this is where this kind of started, and also had to do with attachment. And when I say attachment, the end result is you want people to move closer to you. You want to be approachable. And the attachment part is, in life, fundamentally, people do three things. They move away from you. They move, even worse, against you, or they move closer to you. And this action role, one of the ways to measure that, and you can ask yourself, 0 to 10, how approachable are you? Are you the first to know or the last to know? And what we found in the work I've done now with lots of different individual leaders and with executive teams, and my students report that when they do this in their own unique style, it's not a mechanical thing, in your own style, one person may be warm this way, another person be warm that way, but they do it in a way that makes them more approachable. And they're the first to know rather than the last to know. They're in the game. So there you have it. So action. So those are some key points we've talked about. Now we're talking about projecting. And I'm going to suggest that you can strongly consider looking at using this role to project your presence. Now, when you get that article, you're going to see a profile in there of 8 different practices. Well, you can use those too, but let's go to the next slide and I'll make that connection. Next slide, Jason. All right, so what's this? Let's clear this. This is saying, then we'll drill down on the practices, but we're saying you have a leadership present identity. We have lots of identities in life, right? One of them is a leader. One piece of that being a leader is your self-presentation, your leadership presence. But leadership is not like going to the amusement park. It's not on the playground. It's a lot of work. It's heavy lifting. It's not always clear, but so it's like going to the workout. It's sweat, you got to lift. I mean, it takes energy, it takes effort. It takes deliberate practice. From all of the literature on expertise, we know that deliberate practice is important to be excellent at something. Now, leadership is not like learning to play the piano or becoming a concert pianist, a top of the world-class pianist, because it's messy. And folks who study expertise go, wow, some of them give up on leadership because the agenda always changes. Well, the pianist can work on their hands and do all kinds of things to get strong, and then they perform for a few minutes. Leadership, it's nonstop, it's just going. So the idea is, our identity plus practice will strengthen our habits, create habits. And so we want for you to think about leadership presence as a habit. And so when we think about practice, what is it we need to have a system or a process to use that can help us. And so what I use is ACEs. And while I'm not a card shark or really into cards that much, I do like the concept of ACEs, because when you've got ACEs in your hand, that usually is a good thing. And so when we think about this, let's go back, let's don't go back, but let's reflect on the last slide where it said assertiveness. We do know that people come in different degrees of assertiveness. So let's say that you've looked at that model and you go, well, you know, I'm really assertive. And sometimes when it comes to assessment and when it comes to any of the components of the action role or any of the practices that you might want to entertain that make you unique, there's something that can be very deadly. And that is you can overuse it or you can underuse it. And so when it comes to when we're thinking about assertiveness in this case, you want to be being assertive in the just right amount. That means that you don't take over the meeting. You don't say nothing. You find when the topic and the situation is right, you weigh in a way that people are clear about your intention. And so the challenge is you go, I'm going to challenge myself. Let's say that I'm over the top assertive. I have to be able to use self-control, not to be too assertive and to get my point across when it's not particularly the most relevant. It can in fact be a distraction. And it may be, if I'm trying to develop another person, diminish them because they don't grow and develop. And I'm telling them what I think. And so we execute, then you have to go do it. And so I say that I'm going to assess my assertiveness level. I'm going to challenge myself to be more prudent in how I project it, and I'm going to execute it. I'm going to start a small habit. I'm going to do it in this XCOM executive committee meeting I have to go to now these days, Zoom, every Tuesday morning. So I'm going to do that for the next 4 Tuesdays. And guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to ask for a couple of people I know and trust. They don't want to do me dirt. They want to do me support. And I'm going to, in that meeting, they're going to be there. And I'm going to ask them, how do you think I did? I'm working on this. Or maybe you don't particularly want to ask anybody in the meeting. Maybe you have a trusted advisor. There's somebody you can ask from the outside. And once you get that feedback, you have to ask yourself, well, okay, what am I going to do with this? So anyway, you play the aces. And so that's the idea, is that we have our identity. You need to pick some part of that identity. What I shared with you is the action role, the WW Act action role. You could practice that, or you could practice another practice that you want to be seen in a positive light, which will create a habit over time. And so it's just not enough to have the identity, oh, this is who I am, but are you practicing it? Because authenticity comes into this, right? Authenticity is quite important. And you can be a phony. You can say one thing and do another. It's very, very important to have that authenticity. Okay, Jason, let's go to the final slide that I had as far as content. Okay, so what's this telling us? Right off the bat, let's look at the lower right hand, lower left hand side, LP identity, leadership presence. Notice we zoom on up to habits, and then we zoom back to identity. We've got a chain there. Basically, what we're seeing, a core concept, a leadership, one of the core concepts then of leadership presence is to know what you want to stand for. If you don't define yourself, other people will. We know that leaders, when you're reporting to someone, that person will do at least 3 things. They're going to evaluate you. They're going to know you as they think they know you. Hopefully that's accurate. And they're going to represent you. And the representation is often when you're not in the room. And should we promote this person? Should we, what do you think about this? How is so-and-so doing? Often I'm called in executive committees, we're talking about who should be in the talent pool, who should be promoted when it's a larger company. And so your leadership presence and your identity, if you have projected it in a way and you've done the things in the middle, because remember, it's hard work. You've projected, and the example I gave was the WW Act role. You've practiced it, and sure enough, you're represented in the way that you want to be represented. And guess what? In the end, you get along, get ahead, and make a difference. And so those are the key thoughts I wanted to share with you. Let me just summarize, and then we're going to throw it open, and I'll have Jason coordinate the Q&A. I want to say a couple of things before I turn it over to him, because he'll have the last word. Excuse me, but I want to say a couple of things just to say my goodbye. But before I do that, let me just say that first, we're saying that when we look at leadership presence, I would encourage you all to think about how you're unique. Do not put your humility aside for a moment. You are all wise. And now understand that in the situation and bringing yourself, what's the wisest thing to do? Sometimes the wisest thing to do is to defer to others, right? So it depends, and then I really encourage you to think about this WW act role and then tie it into making it part of your identity. And you know what? It would be wonderful. Wouldn't it be a beautiful thing? And while I'm seeing that now in some organizations I'm working with, and I'm encouraging my students to do this, is to create a community of WW at ACT people, where we're acting in a way that people are going to listen. We've got value-added contributions that are being heard, that demonstrate we care, and that in the end make a contribution not only to the bottom line in terms of our traditional financial metrics, but help people perform in other ways, enhance their well-being, and help them get along, get ahead, and make a difference. So I'd like to say it's been terrific to be with you today. I've really get ignited and excited about talking to the PKE community. And I would like to say, for those of you that are alumni that are watching, bless each one of you. We are lifelong learners. And for those 10 or so folks that are considering looking at and joining PKE, I do believe that it would be a wonderful investment. And what we're trying to do here is make that what you invest, because many other things you can do to have make a value-added contribution. So bless each one of you. That's all I have to say. But Jason, you'll manage it, and Jason will let us know when we get done. And okay, Jace, back to you. Thanks.
Great, thank you so very much, Dr. Kearns, for that very insightful presentation today. We will be conducting our Q&A portion with Dr. Kearns for about the next 15 minutes. First question that has come in from Mark is, what leadership changes are you seeing with COVID-19?
Well, it's interesting, Mark. It's a very important question. Let me put my behavioral scientist hat on here and answer it this way. I think that this is a chance where we have a perfect storm going on. And the perfect storm is that the brain has a magnet for the negative. And that was kind of evolutionary, where we kind of, back in the day, we go, whoa, am I going to be eaten by a lion, and things that are going on. So there's a tendency to gravitate, if you're led that direction, to be negative. What also is, we know that there's something called an emotional contagion, and that is where people will gather around the positive or gather around the negative. So one of the things that I've encouraged, and what I see, and to answer your question, Mark, about what I see, but at the same time, what I've encouraged is for leaders you cannot not pay attention to the facts that are important to be paying attention to, but groups, teams, and organizations, and certainly, and starting with individuals, can get swept up in a negative contagion, and they spend more time focusing on the negative when they should pay attention to the things that are relevant and important, but also think about what they can do in a more positive way. How do we move forward? Because that will spread to your people. And so as leaders, we have to have a responsibility to say, are we leading in a way that provides a balance between what is real and legitimately we should be paying attention to, or how do we perhaps provide a more positive light on this to lead our people to have more hope and encouragement? So that's a thought on that one, Mark. Thanks for the question.
Okay, a number of questions are starting to filter in, which is amazing. Our next question is from Kimuth, and he or she asks, can you please share more examples of leadership presence as asset versus liability?
Right, okay, so a great question, and let's go back to a framework you can use. So you can pick any one of these. Let's go back to pick any particular practice. Let's say composure. And so that is the ability to respond professionally rather than personally to a situation. Now, you can respond in a way that's highly personal, too much. Oh, this, and you can be so upset, you can lose it, you can lose your composure, or you can be on the other side, not showing anything. You seem like robotic. And the question is, how do you find the balance? And so another one that I see a lot with executives is an example, and I think this might tie it together a little better, is honesty. Some executives I work with, they pride themselves in being honest and telling people just the way it is. Nothing wrong with that. Well, we got 3 levels of truth like in life, right? You can lie about something. Something that you know to be true, you can lie about it. You can say, I'm sorry, I don't want to disclose that right now. Or you can explain or share reality as you see it. So back to the honesty, sometimes the situation, the topic that you're talking about it might ring a bell for the executive and they say, oh, by the way, I want to tell you about this. And you should be, and it's not relevant to the topic. It's honest, but it distracts the whole conversation. So sometimes you can be too honest. And the theme is you want to be on any one of these practices that when you think about, they can be a light, and it's a light when you're using the just right amount. It's dark when you overuse it or underuse it or excessive. So think about yourself, am I over or underusing, or am I using something just right? Thanks for the question.
Great, thank you. And our next question comes from Kristen Bruner. How does this framework shift, if at all, a diverse leader is working to enrich their leadership presence?
Could you say that again, Jason? I didn't quite get one of your words.
Yeah. How does this framework shift, if at all, when a diverse leader is working to enrich their leadership presence?
Did you say diverse leader?
Yes.
Yes, a great question. One of the challenges, and there are many with this concept of leadership presence, is looking at it across culture. And let's take the example that we've been using about the framework about assertiveness. When you look at, there's a Robert House, who's at Wharton, he's now deceased, may rest in peace. He did a lot of work for decades with a team around the world. And one of the things that he found from leadership behavior, one of the key practices was assertiveness. But assertiveness has different levels depending on the culture you're in. So in fact, you can be way overly assertive when you think you're just being just right assertive if you're in a different culture. So that was a wonderful question and that is one of the challenges. And so it's very important to be able to understand what is in the filter of someone else that is operating with another cultural filter.
Great, thank you, Dr. Kearns. And the next question comes from Andy Kubitz. How can you repair a poor perceived leadership presence?
Well, great question. Another one. These are really good questions. And I would let's call the Q&A. Why don't we call it Q and response? I don't know how they're answering, but I'm giving you a response. So this would be my response to that one. So a great question. You never get a chance, you hear this trite thing, you never get a chance to make a second impression, right? You hear that all the time. Well, you actually do, but it will take time. And so what you have to do is you go back to what is it that you need to do more of or less of, and perhaps the audience in which now has a perception of you that you would prefer that they didn't have, you may have to use that same role to let them know that this is how I see myself and this is what happened. I mean, you can get into that mode, but the proactive thing to do is to really understand that this whole effort is hard work, and that to be proactive about projecting that identity. But if you do slip up, then understanding you just keep practicing and working on it. And that's where having a best friend at work, a trusted advisor, or someone else that you can get, I call it outside, they'll give you from the outside, and then you have insight, and you can look at yourself that way. Now, having said that, there are some cases where certain people are not dispositionally matched for the job. I mean, it may be that you are in an industry or the industry has changed such that you have to be very flexible, and the organization has to be adaptable, and it requires you to be something that you're not. And there's no complete leader. And when I say that in my classes, I usually hear a big sigh of, whew. There is no complete leader, and you're kidding yourself if you think that's true. So you have to really understand yourself and the situation, the topic at hand, to see if it matches. Great question.
Great, thank you. The next question comes from Dr. Bernice Ledbetter. Dr. Kearns, have you developed an assessment associated with this model to create 360 feedback on the WWACT model?
Well, this is let me give you a little backdrop on this, Denise. So I was asked about a year ago to write a chapter in a book on, it's coming out in March. And many of us who study this and look at this, why do we have so many, a debate on why there are so many bad leaders? And in that book, one of the remedies that I came up with, I mean, I had done this before, but was this WW-Actual. And the idea that's a way to perhaps turn around globally. If people could do more of that, we could do that. So now what I'm doing now is I'm working on that, but I do not have that. And so I would invite you to think about the components. And like anything else, I happen to believe, I'm from the school that there is so much, here's a very academic word, but I'll use it. Interpersonal differences, not intra. And so you say interpersonal, I mean intrapersonal, inside yourself. And we studied personality during the course of a day. And some you can act introverted, you can act extroverted. Just because you take a personality assessment and it says that you are extroverted doesn't necessarily mean you cannot act like provide calm, act in a more introverted behavior. And often I will say that. And so when you look at the model, you go, well, how do you want to define it? And when you see this article that Jason's going to send out, I ask folks to define these things the way you want to. So I would suggest that you look at this and adapt it to the way that you'd like to use it.
Great, thank you, Dr. Kearns. The next question comes from Clint Manalili. When trying to control your level of assertiveness, how do you receive appropriate feedback from those that find it intimidating to express a critical opinion to their boss?
Well, isn't that interesting, where you say that, because it talks about a lot of people are in that boat. And let me just preface this by saying the Gallup organization and others sadly tell us that across the globe, 2 out of 10 people are not engaged in their job, in their work. And in the US, it's even poor, it's 20%, and so why is that? Well, I happen to believe that one of the things, this very action role we're talking about is cause for that. And so what I would say is to be wise and use the model. And it may not be prudent or wise to bring things up to certain other people. Having said that, though, I would encourage you to try the model and to think about what is it that this person cares about, and if you're going to say things, when you think about what is something that's wise that I know about myself, and I'm making this up now but I could say something like, it's a bit uncomfortable for me to come to you. You're sharing that, but I wanted to say a couple of things about what's going on. And I really am saying it because I really want to help the team, and I know that you're interested in it. And so I'm trying to find a way, but how about, what do you think about this? And help me, and so you could think of ways that you can use the model, and I can't really prescribe. So I'm really not too big on prescription because on these kind of things, but I would ask you, I would throw it back to you and say, reflect on it, and then be wise about it, because the wisest thing in terms of getting along, getting ahead, and making a difference in that particular situation at that time may be to say nothing, or it may be to do something like I just said. But a great question. These questions are awesome.
Thank you, Dr. Kearns. The next question comes from Alan Goad. How does this model change between millennials and boomers? Do millennials prefer a more charismatic and warmer style? How does a more traditional leader change for a millennial workforce?
Well, we've had this conversation with some executive teams, and in the end, the conversations go that, what is, when we look at those various components, what is it that we need to do? And this is just brand new conversations we're having. So I really don't have the answer for that, but I would turn it back to you, Alan, and say, that's a great question. And it would be one where you could actually apply the model. This is what's interesting about this framework, is to go in and apply the model to this. And you say, what we're doing in this one particular organization is saying, we want to get closer to getting more engagement with the millennial group. And it's your folks, and we're on these particular topics, but we want to talk about how we go about doing it, but then what we do, but how we go about doing it. So talk to us a little bit, and you get folks from that group. So it's kind of a way to use the model to get feedback. So if you look at the last item when we talked about practice, was seeking feedback, and then insight, and then you learn from the and XCOM groups for example, can talk about this and learn about it. But that's a challenging question and a good one.
Great, thank you. The next question comes from Zolt Alberti. What is the biggest obstacle for most to improve leadership presence?
Great question. And so this is a response. It's my answer, but think of a response. If you go and look at that article, there's a list of 8 practices. If I were writing the article over again, I would have it make it more. Number 1 would be to know yourself, and to be able to have self-awareness and situational awareness, because this fits the theme. There's no complete leader. And in the end, what's going on out there, and I think one of the reasons why we have so many either ineffective, incompetent, or worse, abusive leaders, is that all the money, it's about a $50 billion industry where we go to different executive programs and workshops, and we invest to try to help people be more competent. And what happens in large organizations is they have big developmental budgets, and they have to spend them, and they will find ways to go and help people work on a competency. However, what precedes that is knowing yourself. And it's not a good thing when you're thinking about sending somebody off to be more charismatic or to be more extroverted when they are not that way, but they just need to do it, express it in a unique style. I had one person tell me that the company had spent a lot of money and investment in getting them to do that. So getting them to try to be something they're not. So the idea here is then, and I think it's really important, and I don't want to diminish the efforts that we're doing, but I think we can perhaps better align our curriculum, the things that we're doing with what people really need. Now, it's interesting, the Center for Creative Leadership, which is a well-known organization that invests heavily in leadership development, they will say they're reporting back that companies really don't care so much about theories. They really want their people to be able to find some leadership system that they can use that has practical value to solve the issues and problems that are on the table. And certainly in the academy, in academia, and I think we separate ourselves at Pepperdine from this, is that we really attempt to import real world issues and provide three things. There's three things to keep in mind. You have to ask yourself, is this experience relevant to me? Is it relevant to me? Is it applicable? And is it impactful? And those are three things that I know in the roles that I play in a teacher, a trusted advisor, teacher at Pepperdine, and in my writing. Is this relevant? Is it applicable? And is it impactful? And so we want to make sure that the things that we talked about today in that little presentation I gave, ask yourself, how can I use this? How is this relevant for me? How might I apply it? And how can I use it to have more impact or leadership presence? So thank you for the question.
Great. Okay, we have our last two questions. The next question is, in a rapid changing environment, the perception of a stable leadership position is difficult to maintain. What are three attributes you must maintain at all costs?
Well, another challenging question. Let me first say that, let's go back to that first slide when I said the leader and the leader. So while we have different titles that change and so forth, if you're in an organization or in any realm of life, but we're talking about organizations today, you have the opportunity to move yourself, another group or individual from A to B. So some of the things that are important, one is you have to be able to read the situation, and you have to know what you bring to the situation, and you need to be behaviorally flexible. And I believe that there's a difference between, as a person, individual, being behaviorally flexible, and then the analogy is an organization needs to adapt. So hopefully you're in an organization with leadership that's adapting to the external environment. They're reading the tea leaves, if you will. They're looking at what's going on and they're making changes. But then the question becomes, and I see this very often, that where you're moving along and you're the individual, but things have changed, and maybe what's needed, and often it's a technological aspect of it, you can't deliver. And so you're not flexible enough. So the idea would be, and on those three things would be, one, again, know yourself, be able to read the situation, and to be behaviorally flexible to adapt to what the organization's requiring.
Okay, our last question before we move into the closing is from Sam Lagana. With your example of leadership presence, how can an executive lead the progress of the culture of the community towards adapting the concept of ACEs and enabling the leadership team to put themselves in a new view of their posture in the organization?
Another wonderful question and a strong one, like they all were, to end on. So thank you for all your questions. Let me answer this one, give you my response. So go back to that last slide that we gave, slide 4. And I really want to emphasize that we'll start with, here you are as an individual, and then you have an identity. And then the organization has an identity. And you can do a little Venn diagram if you remember geometry and you overlap the two. Well, we're hoping that your identity matches somewhat with the company's identity. If it doesn't, then it's going to be a bad day every day, because there's tension there. And so when we look forward in terms of looking at the identity, I would encourage individuals, groups, and the entire organization to look at aligning their identity in a way that matches what's going on, what they need to be adapting to. And as an individual, sometimes when we talk about wise, warmly assertive teaching, sometimes those are conversations that are difficult conversations where you're telling someone, it's not fit. It's not fitting. You know, things have changed and it's not going to work. So it doesn't always mean that it's not a gut-wrenching conversation, but it's had in a way. So to answer that question in summary, keep close to your elbow the idea, that slide on the identity feeds your habits and the habits feed your identity. And in between, you need to practice because leadership is very challenging. I think, aside from parenting, it's probably the most challenging role that you're going to play. And leaders make a difference. They do. And so everybody to put a ribbon around that last response, I just to say, all of you go out there and make a difference. And by showing your presence, by revealing and self-presenting and showing up each time in a positive light, you will have a ripple effect on others. And we know from Harvard, that study, from Harvard, they found that 10 times removed, your leadership is going to have an impact on people you're never going to meet. And so hence also your leadership presence. So make it a shining burst of sunshine and not a cloud. Bless you all. I'll turn it back to you, Jason.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Kearns. I'd like to have each of you take a quick 30-second event survey, which I'll launch now. There's 3 questions, so if you could take 30 seconds to do the survey, then I will turn it over to Dean Bernice Ledbetter for the closing.
Great. Well, while you're completing the survey, I want to add my thanks to Dr. Charlie Kearns for a fabulous, fabulous learning experience. Thank you so much. Quick reminders, please remember PEP Connect. Join your PKE alumni colleagues there. And don't forget, Give to PEP Day coming up on March 9 and 10. I want to give a special thanks to our PKE Alumni Network for your partnership in the speaker series. This is genius and it's so fabulous. So please do keep those dates in front of you for March, June, and August coming up. You won't want to miss those. And thank you again, Dr. Kearns, for this wonderful set of ideas that you brought to us. My mind is spinning in so many different directions. But I think as a way to sum up this fabulous learning experience, really our invitation as leaders is to show up with our uniqueness and our wisdom, which comes from knowing ourselves. That's a lifelong journey. And so we can never let up on that task, that opportunity. And that the call is to project light. And in doing so, leading in this way that Dr. Kearns has so aptly and articulately laid out before us, leading in this way does enable us as a business school, the Graziadio Business School, to achieve our vision, which is to develop best for the world leaders, which we really look to our PKE alums to exemplify. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I think a question has been raised, Jason and Dr. Kearns, if everyone can get a set of the slides, that would be terrific. We'll look for that article and look forward to reading it and look forward to the next chance to be together in March on the 24th. Thank you so much, everyone. Wishing you a wonderful rest of your day. Take good care, be well, and stay healthy. Thank you.